All right, Nick, let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. Everyone knows the draft has passed, undrafted free agency has passed, and now when we look at these teams, we try to see of these new players that have been added to the team, can we get any insight from a coach? Is there a word out there of, praise showing that somebody might be a sneaky good pick? And today, we have not one, not two, but three different people singing praise, and some are stars on the Raiders of one player in particular. I think Raiders fans are going to love this one. But before we get into that, I'm Andrew, that's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, some big name people on this Raiders team talking about one guy in particular. And when we get into that, it's none other than Dante Thornton out of Tennessee. The guy is coming in to Raiders in this offseason, OTAs, mini camp, rookie mini camp, whatever it was. He has impressed a lot of people, and he's looking really, really good. Let's get into the article, and then we're going to pull up some data, as always, on the other side. This course from over on Athlon Sports and says Chip Kelly first talking about Dante Thornton. It says Dante is unique in terms of he's just a hair under 6'5", said Kelly, and he ran a 4.3 40-yard dash. There's not a lot of humans on this planet that do that. I think if you had to draw up an outside receiver, you would pick that type of body type. Someone that's got length, someone that's got huge catch radius, but also speed. Sometimes you can get a big guy like that, but he can't really run, so the defensive backs can stay with him. So you add that speed element to him and his ability to sink his hips, his ability to get in and out of cuts. Raiders wide receiver Jacoby Myers, who's entering his 7th season in the NFL, told reporters on Thursday that Thornton has some of real receiver skills, and he's not just a guy who runs fast. Says Dante Thornton, the dude. This was Max Crosby talking about Thornton. He says Dante Thornton, that dude we drafted from Tennessee, the big receiver, 6'4", another freak. Crosby said he reminds me of Martavius Bryant, talking about another wide receiver, extremely talented, very gifted. So it sounds like he's turning a lot of heads. Offensive coordinator Chip Kelly loves him. Says he's basically the ideal outside receiver as far as his frame and his ability. He's kind of a unicorn in that aspect, saying some guys have one thing in the height, but some guys are fast. This guy has both. You talked about Jacoby Myers, a veteran receiver on this team who's been around the block. Talked about Thornton, saying, hey, this guy, he's really good. He's not just fast. He's got actual good receiver skills. And then Max Crosby, the leader of this team, I'd say the outspoken voice, comes out and says, hey, Thornton, this guy is crazy, athletic freak. He's the real deal. So when you hear it from three different sources on the team, two different sides of the ball, and one coach in particular, I really like what we're seeing about Thornton, but we can't just take people's words at it. It's really helpful, but we got to look at the data too. Is this guy as crazy as they say? So let's pull up this first chart that we have, and it's showing Thornton in this verse. It's just kind of like a starter to show you. This is Dante Thornton versus the fastest wide receivers in the draft. So first up, we have Matthew Golden. He ran a 4.29 40. Thornton ran a 4.3 40. And then Chamir Dyke ran 4.34 40. So all relatively similar speed-wise. They're within, a tenth of a second or so of each other. Very, very fast receivers. No one can dispute that. But when you look at the heights, 6 foot for Matthew Golden, 6'1" for Dyke, 6'5" for Thornton. He's 4 to 5 inches taller than each of these guys. Everyone, that's half a foot basically. That's a pretty big difference. So, like Kelly said, when you look at fast guys, it's very rare to have somebody with the height of Thornton. And how does that affect him? How can he benefit from that? So, when you look at a guy like Thornton, and you look at what fast guys do versus what tall guys do, he can do them both very, very well. And that's what my second chart here is. You look at what fast guys bring to the table: breakaway speed, able to get separation, really beat out guys. And you look at Thornton versus the other three fastest wide receivers that we had, Golden and Dyke. You look at this, 16.5 yards as his average depth of target versus Golden had 13.5 and Dyke had 14.9. So this guy, he's fast enough to get the separation faster and does better separation, not faster, but he gets better separation than the other two fastest wide receivers in the draft. But you look on the other graph, He also has a better contested catch percentage than both of these guys as well at 75% compared to Matthew Golden with 61.1% contested catch percent and a 58.9 contested catch percentage. So this guy, he seems like the real deal. Everyone is impressed with him, but what he does is he brings his speed and his size beautifully together and uses them both at a very high level. Not only can he go up and get those contested catches very, very frequently, but also he has enough speed to make his average depth of target, get down the field quick, get separation on guys very, very well. So overall, Dante Thornton seems like an absolute steal for this Raiders team. This is going to be an elite receiver, and they didn't have to draft him as high as the Packers did Matthew Golden. Curious what your thoughts are on this one, Nick. But before we get to you, Raiders fans, in the comment section below, talking about some guys, some young guys on this team. I'm excited about Thornton. I like what he brings to the table. Are you excited about him as well? Is there somebody else on this team that really is exciting? Maybe it's not even somebody that you think is like the best. Is there somebody that brings something to the table as far as a unique skill, maybe a character trait, athletic ability, size that really intrigues you and gets you excited and makes you want to see how they develop? Let us know in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what are your thoughts on this latest news and data out of Las Vegas?
So I think it's very interesting. Thornton is a very polarizing prospect, or was coming out of college. This is a guy who caught 65 passes in his career, not last season, total 65 balls. That is obviously not a lot. A lot of people these days, draftable wide receivers, catch 65, 75 in a single season. But that being said, he averaged 22 yards per reception over the course of his career, including over 25 yards per reception his final season last year. So he is the preeminent home run threat, the prototypical archetypal big play receiver down the field. That's what he is. You brought up the data highlighting his speed, average depth of target, of course, his ability to make contested catches. That's extremely valuable as well. And quarterback Geno Smith, if you look at what he had to do the last couple seasons with Seattle, and it's very interesting with Geno Smith, is he did not throw the football deep very much with the Seattle Seahawks. In fact, he finished 31st in 2023, and then he finished dead last in 2024 in terms of average depth of target, in terms of qualifying quarterbacks over at PFF based on their analytics. So he did not throw a lot of deep balls compared to the rest of the NFL. Now you can attribute that to maybe the Seahawks offensive line. I kind of take it that the Seahawks receiving corps, while very good, was a much more yards after catch a quick slant, and then make a big play on the other side of it than it was win down the field. And this is a kid here in Thornton who is a win down the field kind of guy. What's very interesting about Thornton is he has this ability to get separation and make the contested catches, like you pointed out, but he also has that next gear where he makes that catch and then adds another 20, 30 yards after the catch and turns a 50-yard play into an 80-yard touchdown. That's where I think Thornton could be a special prospect, because usually these big play guys, they're either a speed demon, like the Tyreek Hill, smaller kind of guy, or they're a big, strong guy that wins the 50-50 balls deep down the field. Thornton's a guy that's basically a combination of both. He has the ability to make the separation, make the catch, and then get his foot in the ground and run after it. In fact, he led all of college football last season in terms of yards after catch per reception. What does that mean? It means he caught a 50-yard pass down the field, basically ran away from the corners and safety chasing him, and ran 30 yards more for an 80-yard touchdown. That is an extra gift that is kind of obviously an important deal, right? Having that next layer to make the big play, but add that element on top of it, that yards after catch, can really turn Thornton into a special weapon. But let's take a step back and talk about the Raiders' strategy here, because I know Raiders fans, hey, receiver, big play threat down the field, drafted. I mean, this is not new. We've seen this Darius Hayward-Bay, Henry Ruggs, right? This is not uncommon for the Raiders organization. But the important distinction here is they didn't draft Thornton at number 8 overall. They drafted him at 108 overall. So they used a 4th-round pick on a guy that's obviously a dedicated skill set, as opposed to in years past where they would have fallen in love with him just because he's a big play speed guy and drafted him in the 1st round. Instead, they draft that kind of player in the 4th round where the risk versus reward factor is much more in the Raiders' favor. So obviously Thornton is doing amazing things. I love the fact that both coaches and players are excited about him. And look, we know offensive coordinator Chip Kelly, he will call it as he sees it. We know everything going on with him and Ashton Jeanteen getting his stance, and that's pseudo debate going on right now. He will call it 100% as he sees it. That's what he's done his entire career, whether in the NFL or in the collegiate ranks. So having the praise for Thornton, that is 100% honest. Obviously, we know Crosby being a leader, all his commentary. Jacoby Myers been around the block a long time. So those are very valuable points. That's not some random, fifth round pick or something that's a buddy of Thornton here saying those things. Those are legit guys, obviously, in the locker room and in the coaching staff saying very positive things about Thornton up to this point. So that's obviously very important. But when you look at what the Raiders are doing strategically here, we've talked about it a lot this offseason, is just the entire tonal shift of this organization, right? They're no longer drafting the athletic freaks in the first round. That's what they did forever. Now they're drafting great football players in the early rounds and then using those mid to late rounds to find those specialized athletic specimens that could do certain things for them, right? Is Thornton going to go out there and be a possession wide receiver? Maybe, probably not. He never was that in college. But does he have a chance to become a legit big play receiver? Day one, he already is, right? You can base on what the coaches and players are saying. They're not going to ask him to catch 10 passes. They're not going to ask him to catch not going to ask him to catch 50 passes or 60 passes. They're going to ask him to catch 10, 20, maybe 30, but generate a lot of big plays, right? We're looking for 1 or 2 big plays a game, and that's it. And that's a completely different shift than what we've seen with how they've treated wide receivers in the past. They draft a big play receiver in the first round and say, hey, man, you got to be an all-pro for us. You got to catch 100 balls. It has never worked out. Now they've shifted their strategy. Obviously, Spytech doing a great job. We've covered that a lot. Pete Carroll, Tom Brady's influence as well. Again, I say this pretty much every episode, but Mark Davis does deserve some credit, of course, for how he's kind of delegated, I'll say it like that, the leadership to smart football minds. And the result is they're drafting big play wide receivers and expecting them to only generate big plays. In the example of Dante Thornton here, this is all part of a strategic shift for the Raiders and why the attitude in Las Vegas is so much better now than it has been. Look, I thought Antonio Pierce was a good players coach, was a good culture guy, but you can really only win if you have good players and a good strategy that's going to support those players. And what we're seeing from the Raiders and the addition of Dante Thornton is a perfect example of this, is not only are they getting exciting young players, but they've got a great strategy to pair with them as well.
Yeah, Nick. And when you look at Thornton, I think one thing you brought up is his yards per reception and how little catches he got. But when you're catching 26 balls for 660 yards, like you said, he might only get 30 balls in a year. You only need 39 catches to get 1,000 yards. So, I mean, this is a guy doing some really dynamic stuff as far as that goes. And I was thinking about this and I wanted to check myself. And you look at, receivers that have that unique combination of size and speed and you think who else is 6'5" but also can run a 4.340? That's Calvin Johnson. Now I don't think Thornton is going to be the next Calvin Johnson, but let's say he's 50% of Calvin Johnson. Let's say he's 60% of Calvin Johnson. That would be really, really incredible. But that's the mold. That's what Chip Kelly says is the ideal athletic outside receiver is a guy that's 6'5" and he can run a 4.340. And we saw what Calvin Johnson was able to do. Obviously, a Hall of Famer, a guy that was absolutely incredible with the Detroit Lions when he was there. And if you can get a little bit, you have the frame, you have the speed, you have the athletic ability there. But if he can put it all together, and Jacoby Myers says he's got real receiver skills, he's not just a fast guy. If you can put it together and get a percentage of what Calvin Johnson was be able to the table, that's the ceiling. I think that's the potential of someone with that ability to have that size and that speed. That's what they can do in this game. So I think this is really special. I think the Raiders, like you said, they changed their approach. They're not going to draft this guy number 1 overall anymore. They're going to look later into the draft. But as they get into the draft and they found this guy in Thornton, if he develops well and if everything plays out the way it needs to be, this guy could be something special for the Raiders.